right, so we are addressing a topic that comes up frequently with some of our clients. And we're talking about those who are thinking about retirement, thinking about cash flow options in retirement, and thinking about how to maximize their investable assets. And so, if you are one who holds real estate within your portfolio or is considering holding real estate, whether it be your primary residence or investment property, we're going to talk today about when downsizing your primary residence might be the right option and kind of how we think through that process with our clients from the perspective of being a certified financial planner and also being a California licensed attorney here with Jeremiah. So let's go ahead and dive in. Where do we want to get started?
Well, I think
Yeah,
real estate is a big part of people's portfolio, but it's also a big part of their identity. So when you're talking about changing their residence, you're also talking about affecting their identity to some degree. And so
Their
the question
community
is,
potentially. Their community
yeah,
potentially. Sorry to
yeah.
jump in there, right?
It's, people have a home if they have bought a home and they've put a lot of themselves into it over the decades, and just all of a sudden just to flip the switch and say, let's just move out of this. People have a hard time with that sometimes. It's just really, really hard, to make that transition.
yeah, that's right. And I think it views of who they are, what they're about, where they've headed, where they've come from. And a lot of people, when they look at their home, they think, hey, my kids were here, or I've had these parties here, or this is where I've been. Like you said, there's an identity feature there. But we've had a number of clients who have wonderful homes that they really are not utilizing the same way that they are. And there's a lot of value that's kind of locked up there. And they could utilize that value elsewhere. But then the struggle becomes, how do you do that? And we'll talk about that next. But I think the emotion, Randy, I'm glad you started with that. I think that's a really key point in this. Of some people, they'll just say, I'm staying at my home to the bitter end. That's my desire. I love this home. I always want to have this home. I'll sacrifice everything else first. Whereas others will see it as like, yeah, this is where I live. This is where I have lived. But if I could, change this for a condo, if I could downsize for a way that fits my life currently, wow, I could unlock some meaningful value to do other things that I'm excited about.
And this really highlights the human factor in what we do. If you were to just input these basic variables of your financial plan into a tech-based software that spits out the most strategic outline to maximize your investable assets, it's going to neglect that emotional factor because what could be most critical is that you stay in your home for as long as possible, or I want to stay in this community, in this area for as long as possible. And those are things that need to be considered when we're talking about somebody's life and their finances.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard our clients say, the only way I'm leaving my house is feet first. And that is a ultimate decision. And I don't necessarily think that's the best way to approach that. And they look at their house as their personal identity. And what they're really saying to us is they don't want to move into something that they're going to be dependent on somebody else for how they live every day, how they live all the time. And that's really not what we're saying. We're saying really want to do is get more liberty. You want to get more freedom. And you just have to be smart about how you use this asset to benefit you for the remaining portion of your life.
And if a client were to say that, the only way I'm leaving my house is feet first, there's one to acknowledge the strength of emotion behind that. I love my home. I want to stay here. I want to maintain my independence maybe for as long as possible. But I also think underneath that, there is a conversation to be had as they inch towards an acceptance of getting older and a variety of different outcomes that might be ones that they want to consider that they may have control over and they may not. And it's just one life event compared to other life events that are similar to that. We can make a plan, but we need to consider some variables. And so just to be that hard line, may not serve them well as they think about retirement and aging.
The other thing I think about is kind of the upgrade. I mean, Laura, you were mentioning the community. There's a lot of folks who have a good community. They go for walks in that neighborhood. But as neighborhoods change and turn over, new families come in. The neighborhood's not the same as it used to be, good or bad. But at times there's an upgrade. We've seen clients that are a little bit lonely in their homes. They have a nice big home and it's nice and isolated. They have lots of land around them. They have gardens. And if those are things that they've been enjoying, that's great. But there comes a point where and Randy, you use this analogy a lot, where the house goes from this blessing, and I love the space, I love the plants, to all of a sudden this burden of I can't keep up with the weeds, and I'm having to pull people in, and these are not getting the care they need. We've had a number of clients who they transitioned from their home, which was a little isolating, a little quiet, a little lonely, to a condo community where all of a sudden they have pickleball and they have all sorts of activities
Horseback
going on.
riding, walking.
Right. And
Yeah.
they find people in similar seasons of life. They find people with similar resources. And so the move doesn't just have to be abandoning what was. It could really be an upgrade for folks to say, wow,
It could
I'm
be an
excited about these.
enhancement.
Yeah, about what they're
It could
doing.
be,
And
it could be an enhancement of that value, right?
it's huge. Yeah.
100%. Yep.
So I think it's a
I
good
love
conversation for folks, especially when at times, income can feel a little restricted. We've had a number of clients who are sitting on very sizable real estate that they live in. It's their home, but their other assets, they see it as a very large asset and they're very excited about it, but it's not producing income. It's not funding their life. And so having that conversation of if we, transition some of this value to something else that might really fund your life in the way that you want,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
becomes a real interesting conversation.
What we're talking about there is opportunity cost, right? We're weighing the cost benefit analysis of holding on to that real estate versus how else could that money be deployed? Or if the need is cash flow, how do we utilize that asset to create cash flow? There's a lot of different ways that we can look at real estate as a functional asset for our clients.
In a statement that most people make to me and to us is that my house is an asset. It's an investment. And I have to stop and pause here for a second. I said, it's not an investment. Your house is an expense. You have to pay the property taxes on it. You have to pay the maintenance, the upkeep. You have to pay the insurance. You have to do all those. You get no income back. You get nothing back from that house. So the state of ownership is a cost. And that cost that's what most people don't realize. That costs you a lot to hold on to that asset. It doesn't create, it's not like a rental property out there where you're going to convert it into rental income for yourself. Your personal home is an expense. It doesn't become an investment until you sell it. Once you sell it, you can unlock that asset, that lazy asset, what we refer to, is that it can then come out and be utilized for something else that can give you income, that will give you a lift as far as the financial advantage of that, right? I mean,
that is such a good point, though. The advantage, most people just say, well, I bought my home for X and I sold it for Y. And that's the most simplistic iteration of the investment growth because there has been regular expenses attributed to maintaining that asset, maybe increasing its value. So to actually calculate, and people say, I can make 20% off my real estate, and they compare that to their brokerage account, right? Maybe I'm only making 10 to 15% on average here. I can make 20% off of real estate. Well, it's actually kind of a
well, the question is, how much money
assessment.
did you put into it to get that 20%?
Right, exactly.
So
yeah.
there's a cost factor, not only the acquisition. Everybody goes by the acquisition cost, but the aspect is that you're putting a lot of money into that house. If you're going to maintain your property, what does that add to the cost of the home? And most people, when you do that calculation for them, they go, oh, it's not as beneficial as I thought it was. And I said, there's a certain advantage by having your home. Nobody's going to raise your rent, so to speak. There's some property taxes are held. We got Proposition 13 in California. But again, if they really sat back and looked at the acquisition plus all the cost factors that go with ownership and appropriate ownership over time, they'll find that their rate of return on money wasn't as what they thought it was, is what I'm saying.
Well, even the sentiment, a lot of people say, oh, if I redo the kitchen, I'll get that money back when I sell it, right? And for people who are younger and transitioning homes, yeah, they're going to sell eventually. They may recoup some of that money. For people, in our conversation here that are retired in their homes and looking to keep it, if they redo the kitchen, they say, oh, we'll get that back when they sell it. If they're never going to sell it, like you said, Randy, it just becomes an expense. Your heirs, your kids may enjoy that, right? But you're not going to realize and recognize that value until you sell the home. And so it's an interesting conversation of there can be resistance, there could be joy. I mean, we had some people that are excited to downsize, but for many, it's this value that they want to hold on to.
Yeah, I think more of the conversation we're talking about remodel or renovation, or I've always wanted to do this project on my home, rather than just calculate the ROI that they expect when they sell the home, because that's not guaranteed during their lifetime. But what are the utils, is an economic term. What's the value, the enjoyment that you will receive by making that upgrade or that renovation on your home while you live in it? And that's one way to consider that.
So, for example, the home that we're in, we've had it for over 30 years. And so my wife and I, we looked at the home, and at a certain stage, the home was bigger than it's just the two of us. So the question is, do we keep the home or do we sell the home? And so we looked at our renovations like the kitchen, redoing the roof, putting solar on. All those are time valued decisions. And so the question is, if we were going to sell our home, we would make renovations to make it more sellable. But if we're going to continue to live in the home, and the time frame is not just a couple of years, but you have to go out 10 years, 20 years to make that viable. For example, solar, for somebody who just is going to sell a home in like less than 5 years, putting solar in the home is a very, very bad choice and decision, because you're not going to get your money back in that period of time. Other decisions like insulation and windows and all these other things you upgrade because there's new materials that make your home more comfortable. And so, again, I think those decisions, again, it's a thing, but you have to be logical about how long are you going to stay in that home.
And because I know your home, and actually the home that we purchased a couple of years ago, the issue for the current owners was the stairs. And so if you're committed to staying in your home for as long as possible, that's one thing that you want to factor in when you think about renovations. Is there access to the home when stairs become more difficult, and access to the things that you need? And I think that's a factor that maybe doesn't always come to mind when they think, I want to stay here for as long as possible.
For sure.
Yeah, that's good. Well, why don't we transition a little bit into kind of the nuts and bolts? And when people think about emotionally, I think I want to transition, I do want to downsize, I see all this could be good for my future. Usually when we have someone talking about selling a house, they're not thinking about taxes, because there's some exemptions, especially for married couples, that generally cover the taxes when you sell your home, your primary residence. However, when people have had their homes for 20 years, for 30 years, we have to have a conversation about taxes and do a little bit of a review and see.
You mean I have to pay taxes when I sell my home?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Oh, yeah. The tax man's there at the door all the time.
It's my favorite answer. It depends.
Down for me. Let's talk about the difference between when you sell your primary residence in California and when you sell an investment property in California.
Yeah, that's right. So the biggest one that jumps to mind for most people is that each individual has an exemption when they sell their primary residence. And that exemption is $250,000 of capital gains. And then husband and wife, you get two of them. So you get $500,000 of capital gains exemption. So for most people, you bought your house for $600,000, you lived in it for a number of years, you sell it for $800,000. Your gain there is only that difference, that $200,000. Well, your exemption amount, it covers all over that. You don't have to worry about it. You just sell your house and move on. In some cases, people have bought their house for $200,000, and now it's worth $2 million. They've had it for decades. It's grown. It's
this
increased.
Is real talk. California real estate market has increased.
Has gone up.
Over
Absolutely.
Several decades. So.
And people who have been good savers, they had a very reasonable home. They've been taking care of their home. They could be sitting on a $2 million piece of property, which is not unreasonable in California. And so because of that, they would say, we're going to use our exemption. As a married couple, we have $500,000. That's going to wash away some of the taxes. Then we'll look at, what have you done to the property? Did you do a new kitchen? Have you done capital improvements? Those can be added up, and your CPA can help you walk through those receipts and make sure those are added up. But then at that point, whatever's left from whatever that maximum value you have to what you sell it for, there could be some taxes. And like I said, for most people, throughout their lives in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, they very, very often do not have any gains there.
Jeremiah, can't I just take my profit and exchange it into another property, and then I can move my profit into that other house, right?
Yeah.
Now we're getting tricky.
1031 exchange. You've read about that. You're excited about this idea. And sadly, those don't work for your primary residence. Those have to be rental properties.
There is a silver lining. When you're taxed on the capital gain, it is a capital gains tax rate, which is preferential to your ordinary income tax rate. So in Jeremiah's example, purchase a home for $200,000. You put $500,000 worth of, I think you said 500 or 700 worth of capital improvements into the home. So let's say you have $700,000 is what they would call your cost basis. You sell the home for $2 million, $1.3 million would be taxable at capital gains rate. Yikes. No 1031 here, folks.
And so because of that, whenever we talk about this type of discussion, someone's thinking about this, it's not just the emotions, right? We usually start there. Is this something that's viable? Is this something to pursue? Well, then we have to crunch some numbers. And we haven't even talked about there's depreciation recapture, which for your primary house, probably not an issue. You're not depreciating that. For other rental properties, you have that too. So there's a number of things that we want to crunch the numbers, do the math, so that the client can have their eyes open and say, okay, if I do this, here's the tax bite. Here's what I'll have to purchase a new home. Is that going to work? And all that has to fit together, right? This isn't just something you do because you feel like it on a whim. Like in our planning sense, there's the emotion side, the personal side, as well as the math side. And all those have to mesh together to know, okay, eyes wide open, this is what we're walking into. And this is how this might serve our future, or this might not serve our future. This might be too painful.
So let's talk about some interesting levers. That's another case study. So it's January. You go to sell your home for $5 million. You have that capital gains rate applied to anything over and above your cost basis. Then you take the proceeds from that sale and you buy an investment property, which now you can rent out, and it generates income for you throughout the year. So let's say you take the $5 million sale simplistically, but you purchase an investment property for $2 million, and then you go to reinvest everything that's left over. So now you're receiving income from the rental property, and now you've reinvested any additional funds or equity that you've taken out of your home, and you're going to get a percentage rate of return on that over the course of the year. So we've got lots of different tax events happening all at once. And these are some fun numbers to crunch to say net, what is beneficial to the portfolio? And what's the goal? Do you need ongoing cash? Are we trying to save or mitigate tax liability, right?
You can make the decision to go into other real estate, but you can also make the decision because at that point in time, it's all capital gains. You could go into stocks and bonds. And so the question becomes, are you a good property manager? Is that going to become problematic for you if you buy one or more properties? Who's going to manage the property? Who's going to maintain the property? Who's going to collect the rent? Who's going to find the tenants?
And you're the best one to talk about this.
Participation in this. Listen, this is in my backyard. I know how this works, and I've been doing it for a long time.
And how often do people underestimate the role of being a property manager?
Most people think property management is just collecting the rent. That is not it at all. It can become very problematic. And some people are just better landlords than others.
And now you can hire somebody to do it.
Right, but then you're paying, and then again, you got to watch them. I would never turn my property over to somebody blindly. That's why I've been opposed to people buying property out of state. They buy property in other areas where they think, well, I'll just buy this property and I'll hire a property manager locally to take care of it. Man, if I can't see it, it is problematic. If I can't visit it periodically and know what's going on, it's a problem. Now, again,
it goes back to calculating the expense to maintain that investable asset. So what's the net return? You have to factor in that ongoing expense, whether you're doing that property management work or you hire somebody to do it.
And a big piece of that expense is not just the money, right? It's the brainwaves, right? It's in the back of your head. Do you feel the peace and the joy as you sit on the beach? Or do you feel, hey, I gotta check my camera, I gotta log in, I gotta check, how much are you tied to that emotionally, even if not physically?
I don't know. If I had a beach house, I think, I might feel pretty relaxed.
I like that. The other piece of all this, which I think, Laura, you kind of mentioned a little bit, is what's the goal of this whole thing? Some people want to spend all the money they have, travel, go explore and experience. Others want to pass as much as they possibly can on to their kids. No right or wrong, just people have different desires. And so that impacts this in a really big way. If people are just trying to pass, don't trigger taxes, preserve assets, pass them to the next generation. Well, that's a different plan than somebody who says, hey, I want to use this money to explore and experience. And in fact, I only plan to be in this house, this condo maybe now, 8 months of the year. The rest of the year, I want to be out doing stuff. That's a very different goal. So I'll throw in one other curveball. This comes up a lot as well. Say someone goes to the math and just realizes, I bought the house 30 years ago. It's just worth too much. The taxes are going to be overwhelming. I just can't do it. I'm not going to do this. Right. So they decide to stay in their house. They do that for years and time marches on. And one of the spouses passes away. And so in California, because we're a community property state, we have a really unique and somewhat of a special dynamic that cost basis we talked about that was so low, and that difference for what they sell it for, all that's, becomes taxable. Well, when one of the spouses passes away, that cost basis comes all the way up to the fair market value. So you might have a widow or a widower who was in a home that they said, we would never sell this because the taxes are too high, sitting there, weeks after someone had passed away, and realize, if I were to sell this today, I very likely would have zero capital gains because of that step up in basis. And it meaningfully can change the analysis to say, hey, we're going to keep this home until one of us passes. But then at that point, we're going to downsize, we're going to get a condo, all this money gets unlocked. Like it's a worthwhile discussion. No one likes to talk about death, right? But the inevitability of that, and especially making sure that one spouse is really well cared for, it's a vital discussion.
Well, and that emotional equity changes, not for everyone, so don't be so simplistic, but the thought of this is the home where I raised my family in versus this is the home that I have only lived in with my spouse. I don't want to live here alone anymore. That conversation can change quite a bit.
Yeah, again, it's interesting because I've had this conversation over the years, and when I sit there and explain to them that now you can sell the property, you don't have to worry about capital gains, you can move on and buy something. And she's saying, looks at me, she says, "You mean I don't have to take care of the yard? I don't have to worry about the roof. I don't have to worry about the plumbing. I don't have to worry about the air conditioning." I said, "Nope." I said, "It's done." I said, "You can sell it, take your money and go buy something that is more convenient and maybe newer. So you don't have to worry about it." Or you get in a situation where they're taking care of the outside, like a condominium or, something like that, where that is a project, or you're in a situation where that's all being taken care of. And it's interesting. They make that decision pretty quickly because they start to add up. They do a tally in their head. How much do I enjoy taking care of that kind of stuff? And most people get to the point in their age where I don't want to do that anymore. Let somebody else take care of it. So it's an emotional choice, but it's also a financial choice. And that's what we do for people is we come alongside of them, help them understand the dynamics, the economics, the tax, and let them make the final decision. And if they ask our opinion, we'll give our opinion, right?
Help them implement it because, those just the nuances and going through that transaction, right? That can be a burden. So, well, we are out of time for today. I hope this has been helpful for some of our listeners. Real estate is an interesting,
it is.
I'm going to call it an asset simplistically on the balance sheet. And you can activate or mobilize this lazy, quote unquote, asset in a variety of different ways. And so if you don't have a financial advisor and you want to talk through just a thought partner and some of these things to consider as you maybe are in retirement, or you're just thinking ahead about retirement, or you're thinking about expanding your real estate portfolio, there's a lot of pros and cons to doing so, but it can get tricky. So we'd be happy to help in that. Give us a call here at Tricord Advisors.
Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.